My name is Hazel Matthews, and I'm 34 years old. Never in my life did I think I'd be cornered in my own living room, blood dripping from my face, looking up at my brother Daniel. His fists were clenched, knuckles stained red with my blood. Behind him stood Amanda, my sister-in-law, smiling coldly as she pushed the mortgage deed across the coffee table toward me. That's when I heard the words that still haunt my nightmares, "Do it, Daniel. End her." Before I dive into this nightmare, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. Your support gives me the strength to share this painful story. Daniel and I grew up together in the small town of Millfield, just outside of Portland. He was only 2 years older than me, but he always acted like my protector. Our parents died in a car accident when I was just 7 and Daniel was 9. That tragedy bonded us in a way that most siblings never experience. We were all each other had in this world. We went to live with our grandparents after the accident. They were kind, loving people who did their best to fill the gaping hole our parents left behind. Our grandfather, a retired carpenter, taught Daniel how to fix things around the house. Our grandmother, a former schoolteacher, helped me develop my love for learning and caring for others. But even with their love, Daniel and I turned to each other for comfort during the darkest nights. "I'll always protect you, Hazy," Daniel would whisper as we huddled together during thunderstorms that reminded us of the rainy night our parents never came home. It was a promise he kept for over 20 years. When our grandfather passed away, Daniel held my hand through the funeral. When our grandmother followed 3 years later, we cried on each other's shoulders. She left us the family home in her will. The same home where this nightmare would eventually unfold. Legally, the house was in my name since I had been the one caring for her during her final years while working as a nurse at Millfield General Hospital. I loved my job as a nurse. There was something deeply satisfying about helping people through their most vulnerable moments. My colleagues often commented on my endless patience and compassion, traits I had developed through years of working alongside our grandmother as she volunteered at local care homes. Daniel had been proud of me when I completed my nursing degree. He'd sat in the front row at my graduation, cheering louder than anyone else. He had followed our grandfather's footsteps into carpentry and had built a decent business for himself renovating homes around town. His hands, once so gentle when patching up my scraped knees as a child, were strong and calloused from years of honest work. My marriage to Scott had seemed perfect at first. We met during my final year of nursing school, and he swept me off my feet with his charm and ambition. Daniel had been cautious but supportive. "As long as he treats you right," he'd said at our wedding. When Scott's ambition turned into workaholism and eventually an affair with his administrative assistant, Daniel was the first person I called. The divorce left me emotionally devastated and financially vulnerable. Scott's lawyer had been ruthless, and though I kept the house, I was left with significant debt from our joint credit cards that Scott had maxed out before leaving. Daniel temporarily moved in with me, helping with bills and repairs around the house while I picked up extra shifts at the hospital to stay afloat. "Family sticks together," he'd remind me as he fixed the leaking roof or patched the crumbling driveway. "You'd do the same for me." And I would have. That's what made his eventual betrayal so unfathomable. The first cracks in our unbreakable bond appeared the night Daniel met Amanda. He'd gone for a drink at the Red Lion, a local bar we occasionally visited together. I was working a night shift at the hospital, so he went alone. When I came home the next morning, exhausted from a 12-hour shift, he was sitting at our kitchen table with a dreamy look I'd never seen before. "I met someone, Hazy," he said, his voice unusually animated. "Her name is Amanda. She's amazing." I was happy for him. Daniel hadn't seriously dated anyone since his college girlfriend Jessie had moved across the country for a job opportunity. He deserved love and happiness. If only I had recognized the warning signs that were already there, the slightly obsessive way he talked about her, how he checked his phone constantly for her messages, the way he began to rearrange his schedule at a moment's notice whenever she called. "She gets me," he would say, brushing off my concerns about the intensity of their new relationship. For the first time, I feel like someone sees the real me. I wondered what that meant. Hadn't I seen the real him for 32 years? But I pushed the thought aside, attributing my unease to simple jealousy at having to share my brother's attention for the first time in years. I wanted him to be happy. I just never imagined his happiness would eventually cost me everything. I'll never forget the first time I met Amanda Wilson. Daniel brought her to Sunday dinner at my house 3 weeks after they met. She was undeniably beautiful, tall and slender with perfectly styled blonde hair and a dazzling smile that seemed to brighten the room. She wore expensive-looking clothes and jewelry that seemed slightly out of place in our modest dining room. "So this is the famous Hazel," she said, giving me a quick hug that felt more like a formality than genuine affection. "Daniel talks about you constantly." I was starting to get jealous. She laughed as she said it, but something in her eyes didn't match the sound. There was an assessment happening behind that smile, a calculation I couldn't quite decipher. Amanda charmed her way through dinner, complimenting my cooking while barely touching her food, asking questions about my nursing career while somehow making my achievements sound small. She told stories about her work as a pharmaceutical sales representative, dropping names of doctors and hospitals that were meant to impress. "Your home has such potential," she remarked, running her fingers along my grandmother's antique sideboard. "Have you ever thought about updating it? I know some amazing interior designers who could transform this place." I smiled politely and explained that I loved the house exactly as it was, filled with family memories and heirlooms. Daniel jumped in, defending Amanda's suggestion. "Hazel's just sentimental about the place," he said, giving Amanda's hand a squeeze. "She hasn't changed a thing since our grandparents passed." It was the first time I'd heard him speak about our grandparents' home with anything less than reverence. Their relationship moved at a dizzying pace. Within 2 months, Daniel was spending most nights at Amanda's apartment. By month 3, he was talking about marriage. When I expressed concern about the rush, he accused me of trying to hold him back. "You're just afraid of being alone," he said during a rare moment when Amanda wasn't by his side. "I've put my life on hold for years helping you through your divorce. Don't I deserve happiness too?" His words stung because they contained a grain of truth. He had been my rock during the darkest period of my life. But there was something about Amanda that set off alarm bells I couldn't ignore. Katie, my closest friend at the hospital, met Amanda at Daniel's birthday dinner and pulled me aside afterward. "There's something off about her," Katie whispered. "The way she watches you when you're not looking, it's predatory." I brushed off Katie's concerns, not wanting to cause a rift with Daniel. But I started noticing things too, how Amanda subtly criticized my home whenever she visited, how she would accidentally break small keepsakes that had belonged to our grandmother, how she would interrupt whenever Daniel and I reminisced about our childhood. Just 4 months after they met, Daniel and Amanda got married at the county courthouse. I was their only witness. No family on Amanda's side attended, which she explained away as estrangement due to her difficult upbringing. Daniel didn't seem to find it strange that he hadn't met a single person from his new wife's life. The first real argument between Daniel and me happened the day after their wedding. They had returned from a weekend honeymoon, and Amanda announced they would be staying with me just until they found the perfect place. "We can't keep paying rent on Amanda's apartment when your house has 3 empty bedrooms," Daniel said when I expressed surprise at this plan. "It's the sensible thing to do, financially speaking." I reluctantly agreed, establishing some house rules about shared spaces and responsibilities. Amanda nodded along, but I caught the flash of annoyance in her eyes. Within days, she had violated every boundary we'd established. She rearranged my kitchen without asking, complained about the temperature I kept the house at, and invited friends over for loud gatherings without warning. When I tried to speak to Daniel about it, he was defensive. "Amanda's family now," he said firmly. "You need to make her feel welcome." I began to notice changes in my brother, subtle at first, then increasingly obvious. He stopped helping with household repairs, claiming he was too tired after work. He no longer joined me for our traditional Sunday morning breakfasts. He even began to criticize my obsession with preserving our grandparents' memory through the house. One evening, I overheard Amanda on the phone in the guest room, speaking in hushed but angry tones about financial problems. "They're about to repossess the car," she hissed. "No, I can't ask him for more money yet. I'm working on a better solution. This house is worth at least $300,000. Once we're on the deed." She stopped abruptly when she realized I was passing by the door. The smile she gave me sent chills down my spine. That night, I searched Amanda's name online and discovered disturbing information about tax liens, multiple bankruptcies, and a trail of debt collectors. I wanted to tell Daniel immediately but remembered how he'd reacted to my previous concerns. I needed more concrete evidence before approaching him with accusations about his new wife. What I didn't realize then was how deeply Amanda had already sunk her claws into my brother, and how far she would go to get what she wanted. What had started as a temporary living arrangement stretched into months. Amanda's explanation for why they couldn't find their own place kept changing. The market was too expensive, the available homes weren't nice enough, they needed to save for a bigger down payment. Daniel accepted each excuse without question. Meanwhile, my home was gradually transforming under Amanda's influence. My grandmother's handmade quilts disappeared from the living room, replaced by modern throws Amanda had ordered online. Family photos were relocated to less prominent places, while stylized prints of Amanda's choosing took center stage. When I objected, Daniel accused me of being petty and territorial. "It's just decor, Hazel," he said dismissively. "Why are you being so difficult about this?" I didn't recognize the man my brother had become. The Daniel I knew would never have spoken to me with such contempt. But Amanda had perfected the art of manipulation, always ensuring her more aggressive moves happened when Daniel wasn't around to witness them. One afternoon, I came home early from a shift to find Amanda wearing my mother's jewelry, precious pieces I had kept safely stored in my bedroom. When I confronted her, she feigned innocence. "Daniel said I could borrow them," she claimed. "He said your mother would have wanted them to be worn and enjoyed, not hidden away like in a museum." Before Amanda, Daniel had been just as protective of our parents' keepsakes as I was. Now he was apparently giving them away without consulting me. The realization left me feeling hollow. My isolation grew as Amanda systematically inserted herself between me and the few close friends I had maintained after my divorce. She would invite Katie or my other hospital colleagues over when I wasn't home, feeding them carefully crafted stories about how concerned she was about my mental health. Hazel's never really recovered from her divorce, I overheard her telling Katie one evening. She resents our happiness and has become quite possessive of Daniel. We're trying to be patient with her, but it's difficult living with someone so emotionally unstable. To my horror, some friends began to distance themselves, looking at me with concern or pity. Only Katie remained steadfastly loyal, seeing through Amanda's facade. "She's gaslighting you," Katie said during our lunch break at the hospital. "And she's isolating you from your support system. These are classic abuse tactics, Hazel." Meanwhile, the financial situation in the house grew increasingly strained. Despite both Daniel and Amanda supposedly working full-time jobs, they contributed minimally to household expenses. I was covering the mortgage, utilities, and most of the groceries on my nursing salary, picking up extra shifts to make ends meet. 6 months into their stay, I accidentally opened a letter addressed to Amanda, mistaking it for a household bill. It was a collection notice for gambling debts totaling over $40,000. When I cautiously brought this up with Daniel in private, his reaction stunned me. "You had no right to open her mail," he shouted, his face flushing with rage. "Amanda has a few financial problems from her past, but she's handling them. It's none of your business." "It becomes my business when you're living in my house rent-free while I work double shifts to keep a roof over our heads," I countered, my own temper rising. "Daniel, can't you see what's happening here? She's using you, using us." The look he gave me was so cold, so devoid of the brotherly love I'd known all my life, that I physically stepped back. "Amanda warned me you'd try to come between us," he said quietly. "She said you can't stand to see me happy with someone else because you're so bitter about your failed marriage." That night, I heard them arguing in their bedroom. Amanda's voice rose above Daniel's, sharp with accusation. Your sister has never respected our relationship. After everything we've done for her, living in this outdated dump, helping her when she was too pathetic to help herself after Scott left her. I pressed my ear against the wall, heart pounding as I heard Daniel defending her version of reality, a complete inversion of the truth. They had done nothing for me, I had been supporting them for months. The next morning, Amanda approached me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Daniel and I have been thinking, she said casually. Since we're contributing so much to this household, it only makes sense that we should be added to the house deed. You know, to formalize our arrangement. I stared at her in disbelief. This house was left to me by our grandparents. It's not a rental property. But Daniel grew up here too, she countered, her voice taking on a wounded tone. It's his family home as much as yours. Don't you think he deserves a legal claim to it? If Daniel has concerns about the house, he can discuss them with me directly, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She leaned closer, dropping the pretense of friendliness. He will discuss it with you. And you'll agree to sign over a portion of this house to us, or you'll regret it. The thread hung in the air between us, unmistakable in its intention. That evening, Daniel confronted me, demanding that I add both him and Amanda to the house deed out of fairness and family obligation. When I refused, he exploded in a way I had never witnessed before, slamming his fist into the wall beside my head. You've always been selfish, Hazel. Always taking, never giving back. His words cut deeper than any physical blow could have. As he stormed out, I sank to the floor, wondering how the brother who had once promised to always protect me had become the person I now feared the most. Over the next few weeks, Amanda escalated her campaign against me. I began hearing from neighbors and acquaintances about troubling rumors, that I was mentally unstable, that I had a drinking problem, that I was abusing prescription medications from the hospital. Each lie was carefully crafted to damage my credibility and isolate me further. Daniel's behavior grew increasingly intimidating. He would stand too close during conversations, invade my personal space, and raise his voice at the slightest provocation. The brother who had once been my protector now seemed to take pleasure in seeing me flinch when he entered a room. One evening, while cleaning the guest bathroom they used, I found documents hidden beneath the sink, printouts about involuntary property transfers, quitclaim deeds, and ways to claim ownership of a property through duress or incapacitation. With shaking hands, I took photos of the documents with my phone and sent them to Katie, asking her to keep them safe. That same night, I confronted Daniel alone in the garage where he was working on a project. I thought that speaking to him without Amanda present might help me reach the brother I once knew. I found the documents, Daniel, I said quietly. I know what you and Amanda are planning. He froze, his back to me, shoulders tensing. I don't know what you're talking about. You're trying to take my house, our grandparents' house. The home they left to me because I cared for them until the end. He turned slowly, and the expression on his face sent ice through my veins. There was no remorse, no shame, only cold calculation and simmering anger. They should have left it to both of us, he said flatly. You've had it easy, Hazel. Living here while I had to make my own way. Amanda helped me see how unfair that's been. Easy? I was incredulous. I worked 2 jobs while in nursing school to care for Grandma. I was here every day, changing her dressings, managing her medications, while you were building your business. You visited on weekends, Daniel. I lived it every day. His face darkened. Always the martyr. Poor Hazel, sacrificing everything for everyone else. You loved playing the hero, and it paid off, didn't it? You got the house. I barely recognized the man standing before me. This isn't you talking, Daniel. This is Amanda. She's changed you. She's opened my eyes, he shouted. For the first time, I'm putting myself first instead of always worrying about my needy little sister. I reached for his arm, desperate to connect with the brother I'd lost. Please, Daniel. Think about what Grandma and Grandpa would say if they could see you now. This isn't what they taught us. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, a flash of the Daniel I knew. Then the garage door opened, and Amanda stepped in. "Everything okay out here?" she asked, her eyes darting suspiciously between us. Daniel's momentary vulnerability vanished. "Hazel was just leaving," he said coldly. That night, I set my phone to record and hid it in a plant on the bookshelf in the living room. I had a terrible feeling that things were reaching a breaking point, and I wanted evidence of whatever might happen next. The following evening, I returned from a grueling shift at the hospital to find Daniel and Amanda waiting for me in the living room. On the coffee table lay a stack of legal documents. "We need to talk," Daniel said, his voice unnaturally calm. I remained standing, keeping distance between us. "About what?" Amanda smiled thinly. "About the future of this house. We've drawn up paperwork to add Daniel's name to the deed. It's only fair, considering his contributions." "What contributions?" I asked. "He hasn't paid a bill in months." Daniel stood abruptly. "I've put sweat equity into this place for years. Fixing the roof, repairing the porch, maintaining the yard. That's what family does for each other," I countered. "I didn't charge you rent when you stayed here after breaking up with Jesse. I supported you when your first business venture failed. That's what we've always done, helped each other without keeping score." Amanda's voice cut through the tension. "Daniel told me what you did last week," she said, her tone dripping with disgust. "While he was at work. When I was alone in the house." I stared at her in confusion. "What are you talking about?" She turned to Daniel, eyes suddenly brimming with tears. "I can't even say it. It was so inappropriate." Daniel's face contorted with rage. "She told me everything, Hazel. How you came on to her, how you tried to kiss her, how you've been making her uncomfortable for months with your unnatural attention. The accusation was so outrageous, so completely fabricated, that for a moment I couldn't even form a response." "That's a lie," I finally managed. "Amanda, that never happened and you know it." "Are you calling my wife a liar?" Daniel roared, advancing toward me. "Yes, I am." I stood my ground. "She's lying to manipulate you, to turn you against me so you'll help her steal my house." The first blow caught me completely by surprise, Daniel's open hand striking my cheek with enough force to knock me backward. I stumbled against the wall, too shocked to even cry out. My brother had never, in all our lives, raised a hand to me. "Daniel," I gasped, hand to my stinging face. "What are you doing?" Instead of showing horror at his actions, he seemed emboldened by them. "You've pushed me to this," he growled, advancing again. "Always thinking you're better than everyone, always acting so superior." The second blow was a closed fist to my stomach, driving the air from my lungs. I doubled over, gasping, and he grabbed my hair, forcing me to look up at him. "Sign the papers, Hazel," he demanded, shaking me. "Sign the house over, and this stops." Through the pain and shock, I caught sight of Amanda watching with undisguised satisfaction. She picked up the mortgage transfer documents and a pen, approaching us. "Just sign, Hazel," she said sweetly. "It's the sensible thing to do." When I shook my head, Daniel struck me again, this time splitting my lip. Blood spattered onto my uniform, the copper taste filling my mouth. He pushed me down onto the sofa, looming over me as Amanda placed the papers on the coffee table. I looked up at my brother through swelling eyes, searching for any sign of the boy who had promised to always protect me. There was nothing familiar in his face now. Amanda leaned close to him, her lips near his ear, and whispered the words that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. "Do it, Daniel. End her." Blood dripped from my split lip onto my white nursing uniform as I stared up at the two people who had transformed my life into a nightmare. Daniel stood over me, breathing heavily, his knuckles raw from the impacts with my face and body. Behind him, Amanda's eyes gleamed with triumph, the mortgage transfer papers clutched in her manicured hands. In that moment of blinding pain and betrayal, a strange clarity washed over me. I thought of our grandfather, his weathered hands gentle as he taught us to fish in the creek behind the house. Sometimes in life, Hazy, he'd told me once, you have to know when to fight and when to be smart. Not every battle is won with fists. I let my body slump forward, a sob escaping my throat. Not all of it was acting, the physical pain was real, as was the heartbreak of seeing my brother transformed into this monster. But beneath the genuine anguish, a plan was forming. Please stop, I whimpered, making my voice small and defeated. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't hit me anymore. Daniel's posture relaxed slightly, his fists unclenching. A flicker of something, perhaps shame, crossed his face before Amanda stepped forward. Smart choice, she said, placing the papers on the coffee table and offering me a pen. Sign on the marked lines, and this unpleasantness can end. My hand trembled as I reached for the pen, partly from genuine shock and partly for show. From the corner of my eye, I could see my phone still hidden in the plant on the bookshelf, its recording light glowing faintly among the leaves. I had activated it remotely using my smartwatch when I first realized the confrontation was turning violent. I bent over the papers, making a show of trying to focus through my tears. As I signed, I deliberately misspelled my last name and added an extra middle initial that wasn't mine, subtle invalidations that any lawyer would immediately recognize. I also signed in the wrong places on several pages, further complicating the document's legitimacy. Amanda snatched the papers as soon as the pen left the final signature line, not bothering to review what I'd written. Her face was flushed with excitement as she clutched her prize. Finally, she breathed, looking at Daniel with a smile that sent chills through me. The house is ours. Ours, Daniel repeated, but his voice lacked her enthusiasm. He was looking at me now, at the blood on my uniform, at the swelling already distorting my features. Something like awareness seemed to be dawning in his eyes. Amanda didn't notice his hesitation. She was too busy gloating, her carefully constructed facade slipping to reveal the predator beneath. You should have seen how easy it was, she told Daniel, though her eyes remained fixed on me. All those lonely divorcees and widows with their empty houses, so desperate for company they never notice what's happening until it's too late. But you, she jabbed a finger toward me, you were more difficult than the others. So self-righteous, so stubborn. Daniel frowned, confusion crossing his face. Others? What do you mean, others? Amanda waved a dismissive hand. Details for another time. The point is, we've won. No more cramped apartment, no more living on a carpenter's pathetic salary. She turned to me, smirking. No more putting up with Saint Hazel and her precious family heirlooms. As she spoke, I carefully pressed the emergency SOS button on my smartwatch, a feature I'd set up after Scott's behavior had turned threatening during our divorce. 3 rapid presses would send an alert with my location to both emergency services and my designated emergency contact, Katie. What happens now? I asked, my voice deliberately small and frightened. Amanda's smile widened. Now you find somewhere else to live. This house belongs to us. And if I contest the transfer? I asked, watching her carefully. Her expression hardened. That would be unwise. Accidents happen, Hazel. Nurses work such long hours, come home exhausted. It would be tragic if you fell down those steep basement stairs. Daniel's head snapped toward her. Amanda, what are you saying? I'm being practical, she replied coolly. Your sister has become a liability. If she challenges the transfer or tells anyone about tonight's disagreement, we could lose everything. You mean I should? Daniel's voice trailed off, horror finally breaking through the fog of manipulation that had clouded his judgment for months. Amanda's voice dropped to a whisper, but in the silence of the room, I heard every chilling word. It would solve all our problems. Make it look like an accident. You already started, just finish it. Daniel took a step back from her, then another. I never agreed to, this isn't what I. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. All 3 of us froze. Who is that? Amanda hissed, clutching the papers to her chest. I allowed myself a small smile despite the pain it caused my split lip. That would be Katie. We had plans to have dinner together tonight. I texted her earlier that I was home. The color drained from Amanda's face. She looked frantically between the door and Daniel. Don't answer it. Get rid of her. But Daniel seemed rooted to the spot, staring at his hands that had just beaten his sister bloody. The doorbell rang again, followed by Katie's voice calling my name. If I don't answer, I said quietly, she'll use her spare key. I gave it to her months ago, when I first started feeling unsafe in my own home. The sound of a key turning in the lock confirmed my words. Amanda lunged for the papers, shoving them into her purse as Katie stepped into the foyer. Hazel? Sorry I'm late, the traffic was. Katie stopped abruptly as she entered the living room, taking in my battered face, the blood on my clothes, Daniel's stunned expression, and Amanda's barely concealed panic. What the hell happened here? Oh my God, Hazel. Katie rushed to my side, her nursing training immediately kicking in as she assessed my injuries. She turned furiously to Daniel and Amanda. What did you do to her? Amanda recovered quickly, her expression morphing into one of concern. Thank goodness you're here. Hazel had a terrible fall down the stairs. We were just about to call an ambulance. Katie's eyes narrowed as she gently probed the swelling around my eye. These aren't injuries from a fall. These are impact wounds from a fist. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. Don't be ridiculous, Amanda snapped, her mask slipping again. This is a family matter. Daniel remained frozen, staring at my bruised face as though seeing it clearly for the first time. Daniel did this, I told Katie, my voice steadier than I expected. Amanda encouraged him. They were trying to force me to sign over my house to them. She's confused from the fall, Amanda insisted, grabbing Daniel's arm. Tell her, Daniel. Tell her Hazel is making this up. But Daniel couldn't seem to form words. He looked from my battered face to his own hands, horror gradually replacing the blank shock in his expression. The police are on their way, Katie said, putting her phone down. And an ambulance. This is absurd, Amanda spat. We're leaving. Daniel, get the car keys. As Amanda tried to pull Daniel toward the door, I spoke up. Before you go, you should know that my phone recorded everything. From the moment I walked into right now. Amanda froze. You're bluffing. I pointed to the plant where my phone was partially visible among the leaves. The police will be very interested in hearing you tell Daniel to end me and make it look like an accident. The sound of approaching sirens filled the silence that followed. Amanda's face contorted with rage as she lunged for my phone. Katie intercepted her, using her body to block access to the bookshelf. Daniel, we have to go now. Amanda shouted, panic replacing her usual controlled demeanor. But Daniel didn't move. He sank onto the sofa, head in his hands. What have I done? He whispered. My own sister. The next hours passed in a blur of police questions, paramedic examinations, and hospital procedures. My injuries, while painful, weren't life-threatening, a split lip, facial contusions, bruised ribs, and a mild concussion. The physical wounds would heal relatively quickly. The emotional ones would take much longer. The police arrested both Daniel and Amanda at the scene. When officers played back the recording from my phone, there was no denying what had happened. Amanda's voice clearly instructing Daniel to end me and her references to making my death look like an accident left no room for alternative interpretations. In the sterile quiet of the hospital room, Katie held my hand as I tried to process the evening's events. I knew something was wrong, she said. I should have done more, intervened sooner. You couldn't have known it would go this far, I replied, wincing as the movement pulled at my split lip. I didn't know myself until tonight. Detective Jacobs, a compassionate woman with tired eyes, came to take my formal statement. As I recounted the months of manipulation and escalating abuse, culminating in the violence of that evening, she nodded grimly. We've been looking for Amanda Wilson, or Amanda Peterson, or Amanda Callahan, or any of the half-dozen names she's used, for quite some time, she informed me. There's a pattern here that matches several cases across 3 states. She showed me photos of other women, all middle-aged, all living alone in valuable homes. Each had reported similar experiences, a charming woman inserting herself into their lives through a male relative or friend, followed by psychological manipulation, isolation, and eventually attempts to gain control of their property. She's never gone this far before, though, Detective Jacobs said, looking at my injuries. The physical violence is an escalation. I thought of Daniel's face as he realized what he'd done, the horror that had finally broken through Amanda's conditioning. My brother isn't a violent man, I said softly. Or he wasn't, before her. Detective Jacobs' expression was sympathetic but firm. Regardless of influence, he made his choices. He'll have to face the consequences. Those consequences became clearer in the days that followed. Amanda was charged with conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, attempted fraud, and criminal coercion. Her bail was denied due to flight risk and the discovery of multiple outstanding warrants in other jurisdictions. Daniel was charged with aggravated assault and attempted fraud. Unlike Amanda, he was eventually granted bail, though he made no attempt to contact me after his release. Through his lawyer, I learned he had moved into a motel on the outskirts of town and had resumed seeing a therapist he'd worked with years ago after our parents' death. The investigation into Amanda's background revealed a disturbing history. She had been married 3 times before Daniel, each marriage ending after successful financial scams against her husbands or their families. She had outstanding gambling debts at casinos across the country and was wanted for questioning in connection with the suspicious death of an elderly man whose home she had briefly shared. As physical recovery progressed, I struggled with the emotional aftermath. Nightmares plagued my sleep. Daniel's fist connecting with my face, Amanda's cold smile as she whispered "end her," the betrayal in my brother's eyes when he accused me of lying. During waking hours, I jumped at sudden noises and couldn't bear to be alone in the house where it had happened. Katie insisted I stay with her until I felt safe again. "The house can wait," she said firmly. "Your healing can't." A month after the attack, as the court case was being prepared, I received a letter from Daniel. My hands trembled as I opened it, unsure what to expect. "Hazel," it began, the handwriting so familiar it made my chest ache. "There are no words that can adequately express my remorse for what I did to you. I won't insult you by asking for forgiveness, what I did is unforgivable. I only want you to know that I am facing what I've done with clear eyes now. The fog Amanda created has lifted, leaving me to confront the monster I became under her influence." He went on to explain how Amanda had systematically isolated him from his friends, reframed his memories of our childhood to emphasize perceived slights, and gradually convinced him that I had taken advantage of him throughout our lives. "None of this excuses my actions," he wrote. "I was weak. I chose to believe her because it was easier than recognizing what she really was. And in doing so, I betrayed the most important relationship in my life." The letter ended with his intention to plead guilty to all charges. "I won't put you through a trial," he wrote. "You've suffered enough because of me. Whatever punishment the court decides is appropriate, I'll accept it without complaint." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my bedside drawer, unsure how to feel about his words or whether I could ever trust them again. 2 days before the preliminary hearing, Daniel's lawyer contacted mine with a full confession and a request to meet. Against Katie's advice and my own better judgment, I agreed. We met in a conference room at the county courthouse. Daniel looked diminished somehow, thinner, grayer, the confident carpenter I'd known my whole life reduced to a shadow. When he saw my still healing face, he couldn't maintain eye contact. "I've signed a full confession," he said, pushing a document across the table. And I provided detailed information about Amanda's other scams, including names and dates that might help the police build stronger cases. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "There's one more thing," he continued, placing another document beside the first. "This is a quitclaim deed. I'm formally renouncing any potential claim to Grandma and Grandpa's house. It was always meant to be yours, Hazel. I see that clearly now. The gesture, while meaningful, couldn't erase what had happened between us. Thank you, I said finally, my voice barely audible. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. But I want you to know that the person who hurt you that night, that wasn't the real me. It was who Amanda molded me into becoming. I thought of our grandfather's words about knowing when to fight and when to be smart. The real you wouldn't have been moldable into someone who could beat his sister, I said quietly. There had to be something there for her to work with, Daniel. He flinched but nodded. You're right. And that's what I'm trying to understand now, what weakness in me allowed her in, what anger she tapped into. I'm working with Dr. Marshall again, trying to unravel it all. Dr. Marshall had helped us both after our parents' death. The mention of his name brought back memories of a gentler time, when our grief had brought us closer instead of tearing us apart. I hope you find answers, I said, gathering my things to leave. For both our sakes. As I reached the door, Daniel spoke one last time. I'll always love you, Hazy. Even if you can never love me again. I didn't turn around, couldn't let him see the tears that sprang to my eyes at the childhood nickname. Instead, I walked away, back straight, head high, carrying the weight of what we had been and the uncertainty of what we might become. 6 months after that night of violence, I sat in a crowded courtroom, watching as Amanda was led away in handcuffs to begin serving a 12-year sentence for her crimes against me and others. She had maintained her innocence until the end, claiming she was the real victim of manipulation. The jury hadn't believed her. Daniel had received a 5-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 3, his guilty plea and cooperation with authorities earning him some leniency. As he was escorted from the courtroom, our eyes met briefly. He nodded once, accepting his fate, before disappearing through the security door. Outside on the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters eager for a statement, I found my voice at last. Today isn't about vengeance, I told them. It's about accountability and prevention. If sharing my story helps even one person recognize the warning signs of manipulation and abuse before it's too late, then some good will have come from this tragedy. The physical healing had been the easiest part. Within weeks, the visible bruises had faded, though occasional headaches still reminded me of the concussion. The deeper wounds, the betrayal, the fear, the loss of the one person I had always counted on, those required more intensive care. I had started therapy with Dr. Ellis, a specialist in trauma and family violence. In her gentle but direct way, she helped me navigate the complex emotions surrounding Daniel's betrayal. You can acknowledge the role Amanda played in manipulating him without absolving him of responsibility, she explained during one particularly difficult session. And you can mourn the loss of the relationship you once had without obligating yourself to rebuild it. That permission, to grieve without guilt, to protect myself without hatred, proved crucial to my healing process. I stopped forcing myself to decide whether I could ever forgive Daniel and instead focused on forgiving myself for not recognizing the danger sooner. The legal battle to secure my home continued long after the criminal case concluded. Amanda had filed the fraudulent deed transfer despite the invalid signatures, creating a complicated legal mess that took months to untangle. My lawyer, Miriam Santos, worked tirelessly to clear the cloud from my property title. Unfortunately, this type of fraud is increasingly common, Miriam explained during one of our meetings. Predators like Amanda target homeowners, particularly women living alone, seeing them as vulnerable marks rather than human beings. When the court finally ruled in my favor, declaring all documents related to the attempted transfer null and void, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The house was securely mine again, legally and emotionally. Yet I couldn't bring myself to move back in immediately. The memories of that night lingered in every room. Instead, I rented a small apartment nearby and took my time deciding what to do with the property that had nearly cost me my life. Katie suggested selling it. Start fresh somewhere without those painful associations, she urged. But despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to part with my grandparents' home, the last tangible connection to the family we had once been. Instead, I embarked on a gradual transformation of the space. I repainted walls, rearranged furniture, and eventually renovated the room where the attack had occurred, turning it from a formal living room into a bright, airy art studio. Each change helped reclaim the house as my own, separate from the trauma that had occurred there. 6 months after the trial, I received another letter from Daniel, this one sent from the correctional facility where he was serving his sentence. He wrote about the therapy program he had joined, the remorse that kept him awake at night, and his efforts to understand the psychological vulnerabilities that had made him susceptible to Amanda's manipulation. "I don't write seeking forgiveness or reconciliation," he assured me. "I write because the therapist here says that taking full accountability means acknowledging the harm I've caused, not just to myself but to you. The truth is, I think about you every day, Hazy. I wonder if you're healing, if you're happy, if you found peace despite what I did." I read the letter several times before carefully filing it away with the others he had sent. I wasn't ready to respond, but neither could I bring myself to throw them away. Around that time, I joined a support group for survivors of family violence. The stories I heard there, of betrayal by those who should have offered protection, of the complicated grief that comes with loving someone who has hurt you, resonated deeply. For the first time since the attack, I didn't feel so alone in my experience. Monica, the group facilitator and herself a survivor, noticed my growing confidence during sessions. "You have a gift for holding space for others' pain while offering hope," she told me after one particularly emotional meeting. "Have you ever considered becoming a facilitator yourself?" The seed she planted took root. I began training as a peer counselor, learning how to guide others through the labyrinth of emotions that follow family violence. The work gave purpose to my pain, transforming my personal tragedy into a source of strength for others. A year after the attack, I established the Matthews Family Trust, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping victims of financial abuse and exploitation. Using a portion of the settlement I received from Amanda's estate, liquidated to pay restitution to her victims, I created a fund to provide emergency housing and legal assistance to those trying to escape situations similar to mine. Financial abuse often goes unrecognized, I explained during an interview with the local newspaper. People understand physical violence, but the slow erosion of someone's financial independence, restricting access to money, damaging credit, forcing property transfers, can be just as devastating and even harder to escape. The Foundation's first major initiative was an educational program for healthcare workers, teaching them to recognize signs of financial exploitation and manipulation in their patients. As a nurse, I had seen the warning signs in others without recognizing them in my own life. I was determined to change that for my colleagues. 18 months into Daniel's sentence, I finally agreed to visit him in prison. The meeting was awkward, painful, but necessary for my own closure. He had aged years in the months since I'd last seen him, but his eyes were clearer, his manner more reminiscent of the brother I had known. "I don't expect you to ever trust me again," he said toward the end of our allotted time. "But I want you to know that I am doing everything I can to become someone worthy of the sister I nearly destroyed." I couldn't offer forgiveness, not yet, perhaps not ever completely, but I could acknowledge his efforts. "I hope you find peace, Daniel," I said as I prepared to leave. "For both our sakes." Walking out of the prison that day, I felt a shift inside me, not the complete healing of the wound his betrayal had created, but a scabbing over, the beginning of a scar that would always mark me but no longer debilitated me. 2 years after the attack, I finally moved back into my grandparents' house, my house, transformed now into a space that honored the past while creating room for a new future. I hung photographs of our family in happier times, including ones with Daniel, choosing to remember the 32 years of love alongside the single night of violence. I resumed my nursing career, though I transferred to a different unit, working with elderly patients at risk of abuse and neglect. My personal experience gave me a heightened awareness of the subtle signs of mistreatment that others might miss. Through it all, Katie remained my steadfast friend, joining me for Sunday brunches in my renovated kitchen, reminding me to celebrate small victories, and understanding when grief occasionally overwhelmed me. Healing isn't linear, she would remind me on the difficult days. 2 steps forward, 1 step back is still progress. On the 3rd anniversary of the attack, I received a call from Dr. Marshall, Daniel's therapist. "Your brother has asked if you would consider meeting with him as part of his rehabilitation program," he explained. "He's made remarkable progress, Hazel. I wouldn't suggest this if I didn't believe it could be beneficial for you both." I took a week to consider the request, discussing it with Dr. Ellis and my support group. In the end, I agreed to a supervised session, setting clear boundaries about what I was and wasn't willing to discuss. The meeting took place in a neutral conference room at the prison, with Dr. Marshall present. Daniel entered hesitantly, thinner than I remembered but with a steadier gaze. "Thank you for coming," he said simply. We talked for an hour, about our childhood, about the manipulation that had led to his violence, about the separate paths our lives had taken since. He shared his plans for after his release, his intention to work with other men who had committed acts of domestic violence. "I can't undo what I did," he said toward the end of our time. "But I can try to prevent others from making the same terrible choices." As we prepared to part ways, he asked the question I had been expecting. "Do you think we'll ever have a relationship again, Hazel?" "Not like before, I know that's gone forever. But something new, something built on truth instead of the lies I accepted?" I looked at the stranger who had once been my closest family, seeing both the brother I had loved and the man who had betrayed that love. "I don't know, Daniel," I answered honestly. "I'm not closing that door completely, but I'm not ready to walk through it either. For now, I need to continue focusing on my own healing." He nodded, accepting my answer without pushing for more, a small but significant sign of the change he claimed to have undergone. That evening, alone in my house that was finally just mine again, I sat on the porch swing our grandfather had built, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. I thought about the long journey from victim to survivor, about the scars both visible and invisible that would always be part of me, about the strength I had discovered in the wake of betrayal. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, but for the first time in 3 years, I felt ready to walk it, wherever it might lead. Not because I had forgotten or fully forgiven, but because I had reclaimed my power from those who had tried to take it. If you're watching this and recognize yourself in my story, if you're seeing the warning signs of manipulation or feeling isolated by someone who claims to love you, please know that you're not alone. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Build a safety plan. Reach out for help before it's too late. And if you've already experienced the kind of betrayal I have, know that healing is possible. It doesn't happen overnight, and the scars will always remain, but they can become marks of survival rather than ongoing wounds. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted completely? What helped you heal? Please like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that recovery is possible, even after the deepest betrayal. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you treat yourself in the aftermath.